Asaba Harumasa. This young man is a limited S-rank agent that was given out for free during patches 1.4 and 1.5. Harumasa is a solid unit, especially around the time of his release, considering he is also completely free. However, a lot of time has passed since then, better units have come out, and his damage is beginning to feel a little lackluster. Welcome to a series I'm starting now, which is basically going to cover all sorts of concepts and ideas for potential character buffs in Zenless Zone Zero. Now, immediate disclaimer, any buffs I talk about here are purely theoretical concepts, will almost certainly never make it into the game. So don't take this video or series as leak info or anything like that. This is just my personal ideas, or my friends' ideas, for what a buff could look like. And anyhow, with that aside, let's get right into it. This video will assume you already roughly know how Harumasa works. If you don't, however, I'll briefly explain it now so that everyone's caught up. Harumasa is an electric attack agent that specializes in doing his damage through his enhanced dash attacks. These slashes can be performed when Harumasa stacks with Electro Prison. How do you get Electro Prison? You generate these things called Electro Quivers. You can generate these quivers through various means, those being Basic Attack 5, Anomaly Triggers, Chain Attacks, and EX Special Attacks. Thus, the game plan for Harumasa is to spawn quivers, detonate them through this attack called Falling Feather, or by spawning even more of them. This then lets him perform his dash attacks. That's the gist of it. I'm going to be talking about Electro Quivers, Electro Prison, and his dash attacks a lot in this video, so it's good that you're aware of these terms before we begin. Oh, and one final thing, when an enemy has Electro Prison stacks, Harumasa will enter the Awakened state. This will be important both later and now. Why is it important now? Because we should all enter the Awakened state immediately. Wake up! Gidari and Jufufu are on banner right now, and I know an easy way to save you money on bulls. This is where Lootbar comes in. With Lootbar, you're looking at up to 23% discounted prices on your Polychrome related purchases. Use my link in the description or pin comment, and you'll receive special coupons for extra discounts to this banner. Simply select your item, type in your UID and region, within seconds you will find your product in-game. Lootbar has been offering its services not just for Zenless, but also other games for a very long time, and I assure you, it is completely safe to use. But, enough blabbering, let's get back to the video. When looking at out above Harumasa, I want to go beyond just simple changes to his numbers, as that's one easy way to do it. For all intents and purposes, I'll avoid simply bringing up higher scalings for all of these, as that's pretty much obvious. Harumasa is a character that I personally rarely actually have any gameplay issues with. I find he works very well as long as you know what you're doing, for the most part. Since I don't think any part of him is particularly janky, I'll mostly bring up certain parts of his kit I would like to be enhanced in some way, or simple quality of life changes, sometimes both. Let's start with Basic Attack. Harumasa's Basic Attack Shrink is largely useless outside of the very last hit. Aside from his regular Basic Attack Shrink of 5 attacks, he also has strafing attacks and rolls depending on what direction you hold while attacking. Unfortunately, these attacks are also useless and don't do anything. Roll doesn't even have iframes or anything. In an effort to make his basics better, let's first make so that his very first Basic Attack 5 in combat immediately spawns 6 quivers. This will make it so that setting up quivers at the beginning of battle will take significantly less time, a very annoying step of playing Harumasa otherwise. In addition to the above, let's make his strafing attacks do something. If Harumasa is attacked during one of these strafes, it will automatically perform a dodge counter. This special dodge counter will immediately spawn a full set of 6 quivers. This can only trigger once every 6 seconds. That's one simple change I'd make. This makes him a little more viable on field, and lets him spawn more quivers, and actually makes some of his movesets actually usable. Some more quality of life changes. Harumasa's Basic Attack 5 is now invincible, letting him spawn quivers without worry. Finally, all of Harumasa's basic attacks will deal electric damage during the Awakened state. The damage dealt by his attacks is considered Awakened damage. I'll get to that later. Since these are also considered basic attacks, let me briefly touch on some changes to his Electro Quivers. Harumasa's quivers will now fly to enemies much faster, reducing their travel time. The cooldown for spawning quivers from anomalies should be reduced to 6 seconds. In addition to this, the anomaly quivers can now override other quivers, and the 6-second cooldown is separate for every different attribute. This means that if you were to get 2 different anomalies back to back, both spawn quivers. This makes for some pretty interesting combo routes if this were to be actually implemented. Oh, also the damage instance of a quiver hitting an enemy is called Haoto no Ya. You will need to know this, because I bring it up a few times. When an enemy with Electro Prison stacks is defeated, any remaining stacks will be converted back into quivers and sent flying to the nearest enemy. If there is no enemy present, the quivers will be consumed, and Harumasa regains 3 energy for each quiver. This basically means that whenever you kill an enemy that still had dashes on them, those dashes don't just get wasted, like you either send them to another enemy or you just get the energy refunded to you. Which, either way, just helps. It's some quality of life that I feel like you should have. If Haoto no Ya hits enemies which already have the maximum number of Electro Prison stacks, those quivers will deal increased damage and trigger the same energy refund effect, based on the number of stacks over the Electro Prison limit. All quiver damage is considered awakened damage. So overall, what exactly do these changes do? Well, it's some added quality of life when fighting multiple enemies, or in the case of overstacking, making it less punishing by increasing the damage the wasted quivers do, as well as give back some energy to help generate more later. This change is particularly big for M6 Harumasa, who wants to spam as many quivers as possible to do the highest amount of damage. The energy refund makes it so he can use 1 or 2 extra EXs per stun, while also making sure that all those overstacked quivers actually do some notable damage. But beyond M6, this is actually really nice for M0 players or any casual Harumasa player who isn't very familiar with their quiver management. Now, if they overstack at all, they get extra damage for it and some energy back, just in case. Okay, that's it for the basic attack changes. Let's very briefly go over dodge. Harumasa's dodge counter now skips to Harumasa's last basic attack, making summoning quivers in combat easy. Dodge counters performed during the awakened state are considered awakened damage. Normally, Harumasa's enhanced dash attacks have a 40% damage reduction level, and they cannot be cancelled. I still don't want these to become dash cancelable, as I like having to commit to a move. I think it's pretty cool. But I'd like to bump this up to 70% damage reduction, because sometimes you just can't move out of the way, and Harumasa's defense is very low. Finally, Harumasa's enhanced dash attacks now skip to his last basic attack as opposed to his 4th basic attack, speeding up gameplay just a little bit. I would make the changes to his assists, honestly, aside from making his follow-up and quick assist both skip to his last basic attack. The special attack doesn't really need anything either. I think it's good the way it is. Just one thing, the special attacks performed during the awakened state are considered awakened damage. Finally, chain attack and ultimate. Chain attacks and ultimates are now considered awakened damage. Very important. Harumasa's ultimate also skips to basic 5 now instead of basic 4. One big change I want to make though is regarding how Harumasa's ultimate works. I had this cool idea where Haru ultimate could work similarly to Totalize or Yu-Gi-Oh! In case you're not familiar, Totalize deals extra damage depending on how many seconds are left in the stun window. Imagine that, but Harumasa's ultimate deals extra damage based on the number of Electro Prison stacks currently on the enemy. Harumasa's ultimate deals additional damage based on the number of Electro Prison stacks on the targeted enemy. For 7 seconds after Harumasa uses his ultimate, the Electro Prison stack limit is removed, and all quivers are instantly fired at the enemy. After the final hit of the attack, Harumasa deals an additional 200% of attack damage for every Electro Prison stack on the enemy, up to a maximum of 5,000%. Electro Prison stacks will be set to 1, Harumasa no longer consumes Electro Prison when using dash attack Iten no Tsuru Slash, and his damage increases by 30% for 7 seconds. Okay, that's a big one. To summarize, Haru's ultimate is now essential for dishing out massive damage. The play is to reach the max stat limit, and then ultimate will immediately use any quivers that are currently on field while it's firing. Once the last hit has happened, it will use up all Electro Prison stacks that are currently on the enemy for a huge nuke based on how many you had. The ult also now has the additional effect of giving Harumasa infinite dashes and some damage bonus for the next 7 seconds. This doesn't actually make a massive difference for his M0 or M1 combos, but it does make for an extra level of depth to consider when routing combos. Infinite dashes sounds nice, but you have to consider that you have to actually buff these dashes with the Coal Arena or whatever support you're using. And, well, if you just keep dashing infinitely, the buff's gonna run out, you're gonna stop doing damage. So, it's nice. It's a pretty big quality of life, especially if you're doing this out of stun on field. But it doesn't mean you get to skip playing the supports. But I think it's cool. It sounds really strong, but I think it's fairly balanced once you start to think about it a little bit. Now, the max multiplier I wrote here was 5,000%. Realistically, with M0, you're only going to get like 2,000%, which is still a lot, but the only way to get the full 5,000% is with M4, but I'll get to that later. Okay, now let's quickly go over his score passive and additional ability. The changes here are fairly small, but vital to making this buff actually effective. In case you are not familiar, Harumasa's core passive gives him 25% crit rate, 72% crit damage, but this buff specifically only affects his dash attacks, and nothing else. I've been bringing up the awakened damage tag a lot. This is where it gets explained. A very simple fix they've been giving buff characters is to make their specific core buffs apply to the whole kit. This is my way of doing that. When there are stacks of Electro Prison on an enemy, Harumasa enters the Awakened state, and all Awakened damage has 25% increased crit rate and 72% increased crit damage. Harumasa will remain in the Awakened state for 4 seconds once Electro Prison expires. Easy as that. Now let's address his additional ability. I only want to make a slight change here. Right now, Harumasa gets 40% damage when attacking either a stunned or anomaly-infused enemy. I want to change this to 50% if the enemy is stunned, and 100% if the enemy is under an anomaly. These buffs do not stack, and the more powerful buff will be prioritized. What this change does is further incentivize players to try play around anomaly timings in their stun window, but also it buffs Harumasa's anomaly teams, mainly Mono Shock, and increases their damage to be up to par with the stun team, since they can maintain 100% uptime on the anomaly portion of the buff. Okay, that was a lot. I also want to quickly go over some Mindscape changes. Currently, ZZZ is not buffing any character Mindscapes, which truthfully I think is kind of stupid, but hey, I'm going to go over some simple changes that could be made to them. I have no issues with Harumasa's M1. It makes Quivers hit twice, and increases the Electro Prison stack limit to 7, which means he can do up to 7 dashes at once. The only change I want to make here is to have his Quivers ignore 15% of enemy defense. Nothing major, I think it just would be nice. As for Harumasa's M2, this Mindscape is honestly kind of awful. Right now, the way it works is that it gives Harumasa's next 7 dashes 50% extra damage after he uses a chain attack or an ultimate. This buff amounts to around 10% DPS in his stun teams, where it has about 60 to 70% uptime. Now for his on-field teams, Mono Shock in particular, this Mindscape barely even scratches 1% DPS. 1. The buff itself is good, but Harumasa already gets a lot of damage percent from his additional ability, Signature Engine, as well as support buffs, meaning this 50% isn't as impactful as it might seem at first. A lot of the time you won't even notice it. And it's actually such a weak buff that it is not worth doing an extra chain attack and stun over the basic combo, because just losing out on like 2 dashes already makes it worse than getting the buff from M2, because it's just that small. The fact that it also only applies to his dashes doesn't help either. Dashes are like 60% of his damage, but that's not 100%, So here's my change to his Mindscape. Every 12 times an enemy is hit by Haoto no Ya, Harumasa will increase his own attack by 5% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Repeated triggers refresh their duration. When hitting an enemy that's stunned or under an attribute anomaly, immediately gain 2 stacks of this effect. This can happen once every 20 seconds. First, I changed the buff to combat attack instead, but Harumasa simply likes more. Second, I also made its condition much more universal. If you're not familiar, every 12 times an enemy is hit by Haoto no Ya just means every time you use 6 quivers. That's what that means. So whenever you use 6 quivers, by overriding or with Falling Feather, you get this buff. You get a stack of it. And then as long as you do that once every 12 seconds, you're going to be able to stack it all the way to 5 times, which is 25% combat attack, which is nice. It's much more significant, and it buffs all his damage. After using Harumasa's M4 a little myself, I don't really hate it as much as I used to. The only thing I change here is that instead of applying the max number of Electro Prison to all enemies, it still applies 7 marks to all enemies, but also spawns a full set of 6 quivers when he uses ultimate. We can't have the ult still giving the maximum number of stacks anymore with M4, because that would now mean it's giving an infinite amount, which means that Harumasa is doing infinite damage on ultimate. As funny as that would be, we have to rework this if we want to keep the cool totalized ultimate idea. Finally, M6. The only change needed here is to make this M6 damage count as awakened damage, so it gets the crit buffs from his core. I already love how this Mindscape works personally, and is already one of, if not the strongest single Mindscape in the game, so it doesn't need a buff. Also, certain mechanics I added in the base kit already make M6 a lot more stupid, so there's that. Alright, that was a lot of stuff. Honestly, I don't know when the hell Harumasa is getting of his buff, or even rerunning. And I'm confident whatever we get won't even be half as cool as the concept in this video. Like, listen, I love that totalized idea with like the Electro Prison stacks, but that's just not gonna happen. It's not even like that OP, it's just, I think it's way too cool for them to think of it. So it's just not gonna happen. But that's fine, I had fun making this and thinking about the concepts and just writing it down in general. Did you like some of the concepts in this video? What would you do to buff Harumasa in a creative way? Let me know in the comments. I am done here. See you guys in another video.